Drop the mic.
Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Yikes. So remember, first couple weeks, what's happened in Naomi's life is she, her husband, and 2 sons moved from their homeland of Bethlehem because there was a famine. And for whatever reason, maybe it was good intentions or whatever, but Elimelech, her husband, moved Naomi and their 2 sons into Moab, a foreign land with all this demonic activity, worshiping other gods, and not a good place. Not a place where you are going to be able to easily follow God's will for your life, listen for the voice of God, because you are surrounded by people who want nothing of it. While they're there, her husband dies. While they're there, her 2 boys marry a couple Moabite girls. Okay? There was, do you remember their names? Ruth. Not Oprah. Orpah, right. Ruth and Orpah. They marry Ruth and Orpah. They're married for a while, and then her 2 sons die. This leaves the 3 ladies, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. After some time, Ruth decides, you know what? I need to go back to Bethlehem. She looks at Bethlehem and she realizes that God has rescued the people there from the famine. She has preserved their lives. And that if she wants to be under God's blessing, and if she wants to be able to pursue God the way she knows she needs to, that she needs to go home. So she tells her daughters-in-law, hey, I'm going back to Bethlehem. You guys stay here. This is your land. You guys will have a better life here. Orpah goes, you're right. And she leaves. Ruth says, no way. Where you go, I go. Where you stay, I stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. I'm with you. I'm going to be with you no matter what. Even though life has been hard, and even though this God that you worship doesn't seem to be favoring you, I'm with you. Her loyalty is incredible. And so Ruth and Naomi head back to Bethlehem. And when they get there, the people are shocked. Because when you leave your country, you leave everything. You lose everything. Whatever you didn't take with you is gone. They get back and everybody's like, Naomi, oh my gosh, where have you been? And she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Because I went away full and the Lord has brought me back empty. The Lord has afflicted me. The Lord has brought misfortune upon me. And today we're going to look at some more of this story where Naomi and Ruth are in an impossible situation. Their life is in ruins. This wasn't just, oh, her husband died. Her husband died. This wasn't for Ruth, oh yeah, one of Naomi's sons died. Her husband died. They've lost everything, and now they are 2 women. Ruth being a foreigner in this land, and foreigners and foreign women were certainly not going to have the easiest go of it. And yet they're in this place, and their life is in ruins. And many times, we talked about last week, many times we look at ruins as the end of a story. But when God is involved, over and over and over again in the Bible and in the testimony of people who have a relationship with Jesus, that God can bring new life out of the ruins. And I want to challenge you right here from the beginning. Some of you, you feel like your life is in ruins. Some of you, you look at your life right now and you're like, that's it. My life is going to be like this forever. Or that's it. Nothing can ever get any better. There can't be any hope in my life. There can't be any restoration. Nothing. It's just, that's it. It's ruined. And I told you about where I like to go camping up there and when the flood came through and just wiped out everything. But now, 30 years later, so it took some time, Now there is new life and new growth, and it's beautiful. God can bring life out of the ruins. And we're about to see something that is going to happen with Ruth and Naomi, but what we need to understand is that when God brings blessing out of our losses, a lot of times it comes from unexpected places. Somebody tell me, what was the biggest surprise that you've ever experienced?
I got cats in a birthday.
You got cats? Cool, like live animal kittens?
Yeah, I got 2 kittens on my birthday.
Wow, that's fun. Nice. What else? Biggest surprise ever? A bicycle. When you got a bike. Getting to go to Honduras. Okay. So, yeah. I'm sorry? Siblings. Whoa. Oh, older sister. Great. Okay. Huge surprises. And we need to understand that when we're working with God, when we are allowing God to speak into our lives, a lot of times these blessings are going to come from unexpected places. But it is so easy for us to go like this and be like, God, you've got to work like this. Okay, if you're going to do something in my life, it has to be right here. But the reality is, many times it's going to come from out here. It's going to come from areas that you don't even see or expect, or you didn't even know that it could come from that place. And it can be huge. So if you have your Bible, open it up to the book of Ruth. It's this little book. Well, don't everybody move at once. Bring your Bibles. To Ruth chapter 2. And it says that Naomi had a relative. So Naomi and Ruth have just arrived back into Bethlehem, and it's the beginning of the barley season. That's the way that chapter 1 ends. It says, and they arrived just as the barley season, as the barley harvest was beginning. And you're going to see why that's really important in just a minute. But then chapter 2 starts really off topic because a new character is introduced to this story. It says, now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side. What was her husband's name? Nice, Lacey. Good job. Elimelech, from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Now, have we ever heard the name Boaz before in this story? We haven't. And so Naomi, they leave, and while they're in Moab, goes, we've got nothing. That's it. We are on our own. And then when she comes back, Naomi, remember, she says, I went away full and I came back empty. I've got nothing. The Lord has afflicted me. It's not like she was in Moab and went, okay, if I go back home, I can strategize and I can probably get Boaz to, front me some money and maybe he could let me stay in his back house for a while and I might be able to make it. He is not even a consideration. But here goes, Naomi has a relative on her husband's side, and his name is Boaz. But she is hopeless. She doesn't consider that. She thinks that there is nothing for her. And Ruth, the Moabite, said to Naomi, hey, let me go to the fields and pick the leftover grain behind anyone whose field I find favor. One of the things that they did, they'd go into the barley fields, and the people who owned the land, okay, they would go and they had workers who would go and they would pick all the barley. But it was customary at that time where they wouldn't pick all of it. They would leave some behind for the poor. It was a way that they took care of people in their community. And all the landowners knew this. And so all the workers would go in and they'd pull it off and some of the stuff would just kind of fall to the ground. And rather than them picking it up and collecting all of it, they would just leave it. And then those in need would come in behind them and they weren't sneaking around. They knew they were there. They would come in behind them and they would pick up the stuff off the ground or the things that were left on the stalks. Ruth says to Naomi, she goes, hey, I got an idea. We've got nothing. I don't know where they were staying. Maybe they got some cardboard boxes and they propped it up against the side of a house and they've just kind of been living behind a dumpster behind the local Arby's. I don't know. But things are not good. They have nothing. And so they're there, and Ruth says, let me go and pick the grain behind the harvesters. Now, do you remember what happened the last time that Ruth, or when Naomi tried to stop Ruth from coming with her? What happened? Ruth ended up coming. Naomi went, no. I mean, she tried many times. No, your life will be hard. No, you're a foreigner. No, this isn't where you should go. And Ruth goes, where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Okay, I'm going. And Ruth finally just goes, whatever. Fine. Go with me. And she came. So this time, Ruth goes, hey, Naomi, I'm going to go find a field where I feel like maybe somebody will let me tag along behind the people who are going behind the harvesters. And I'll just sort of I will sneak around. I will do what I need to do so that I can get us some food. Naomi doesn't even try and stop her. Naomi is like, fine, go ahead. Good luck. This is not going to end well. Oh man, she's a foreign lady and oh gosh, God protect her. So Ruth heads out and begins to glean. That's what it's called when you collect the grain. It begins to glean behind the harvesters. And she's walking through and the workers begin to notice her. And they're like, okay, dude, who's the chick? I don't know. Shut up, keep picking, and they just keep going, and she's just right behind them, and she's getting a little bit more bold. I mean, Ruth is an amazing lady. She knows what she needs to do, and she just goes after it. And so they're picking, and they're going, and Ruth is getting actually quite a bit of grain, and things are going pretty well. And then it says, as it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was in the clan of Elimelech. Now, Ruth took a huge chance because it was not okay for her as a foreigner, for her as someone who's not part of this community, to just go and take food from the community. Do you realize that's what she was doing? This was food that was allotted for the poor in their community, for people who were residents of that country. And here a foreigner is going in. She was taking a huge risk. And it says, she was working, as it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. As it turns out, it happened. Whoa, what a coincidence. Was this a coincidence that she was working in the field of Boaz? Who set this up? God. God was at work. This was not a chance. And Israelites, the children of Israel, didn't believe in chance. So the writer is messing with us. He's going, look, hey, as it turns out, she was working in the field of Boaz. God was beginning to orchestrate things here from the beginning. Could Ruth and Naomi see that yet? Not yet. To them, still hopeless. To them, we're going to try and scrape by. We're going to try and do whatever we can do. They couldn't see this yet, but God was still at work. But I want you to remember this. Not that. What's happening? Someone help. Is anyone back there in the booth? What happened? Okay, awesome. I want you to remember this. So go ahead and clear that. At least get rid of that. Just because you don't see God working. Oh, there it is. Just because you don't see God working doesn't mean God isn't at work. Think about that in your life right now. Just because you don't see God working does not mean he's at work. He isn't at work. Ruth and Naomi were still destitute. They still had nothing, and they didn't even have any prospects. This was Ruth out on her first day trying to sneak around and see what she could do without getting stoned. with rocks. Without getting kicked out of the country. This was just her trying to make ends meet. So this was not a very hopeful time for them. As it turned out, it's not just chance. It wasn't just luck. God was orchestrating things. God was beginning to set things up that we're going to see play out a little bit later. But we all need to recognize, especially in times when things are really bad in our lives, that just because you don't see God working does not mean he's not at work. But that is an easy lie for Satan to tempt you with and go, God doesn't care. God's not listening to you. God's forgotten about you. But he's not, just because we don't see it. So the harvesters are going through the fields. The gleaners are behind them, trying to collect some food for themselves. And then there's Ruth. I don't know how she walked. Probably not like that. But she's gleaning what the gleaners have left over. And so, and luckily it wasn't raining, so she was at the dry gleaners. And come on. There we go. Okay, so she's collecting this stuff, and Boaz shows up. And he goes, hey, everybody. And they're like, Bo, how's it going, man? And he's like, greetings, the Lord be with you. And all of the harvesters and all of the gleaners say, and the Lord bless you too. And they keep going. They obviously see Boaz as an incredible guy. They don't mind working for Boaz. The people who are gleaning behind the harvesters, they appreciate Boaz. And apparently, Boaz has always been very generous. He's always looked out for those who were less fortunate. And so this group of people, it wasn't like, oh, here's the master. They're like, hey, master. And he shows up, and everybody's glad to see him. And Boaz calls over the harvest manager. He goes, hey, who's the chick? And he goes, and at this point, the harvester, the manager gets a little like, oh yeah, so we were harvesting, and the dry gleaners were behind them, and then she just showed up one morning. And I was like, what's up? And she just looked at me and was like, what's up? And I didn't really know what to do. She acted like she was supposed to be here. And I don't know. She's definitely not one of us. Look at her clothes. She's dressed funny. And Boaz, this is where Boaz goes, so what'd you do? And he said, well, I approached her. I was like, sup? She said, sup again. I was like, what are you doing here? And she said, please, let me gather some grain. Please, I won't take too much. I won't be in anybody's way. I need some food to survive for my mother-in-law. And so he let her. This is where Boaz has a choice. He has every right, and culturally it would have been not only acceptable but expected for him to go to Ruth, or actually for him to send the manager to Ruth and kick her off his land. Would have been totally acceptable. It wouldn't have been mean. It wouldn't have been inappropriate. It is what he should have done culturally. But he looks at her not as a foreigner, not as someone who is disrupting things, because Ruth is kind of the topic of conversation amongst the harvester and the gleaners. They don't know who this person is. And she's definitely a foreigner. In fact, Moabites had a distinct look, and so they probably could have looked at her and could tell she was a Moabite, which was a little bit scary. He didn't look at her as this foreigner, as this person who was disrupting things, as this person who might take too much or might get in the way. Instead, what he does is incredibly unconventional. In fact, it's scandalous what he chooses to do. He goes up to Ruth and he says this, and I'm just going to read it because, listen to this. This is a guy. This is my daughter. Listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men had filled. Let me tell you this. Guys in the room, this is how to be a real man. I'm telling you. Look at Boaz. And as we go through the rest of this story, watch Boaz. Boaz is a real man. He's not just looking out for himself. He's not just trying to assert authority and show who's boss and be the tough guy. Everyone loves him because he's a real man, because he cares for other people. With Ruth, he doesn't just let her stick around. That was already like, whoa. She would bow to him and be like, oh, thank you for just letting me stay and not beating me. He didn't just let her stay around. He said, stick around. And I want you to watch where the men are harvesting. I don't want you in some field where they harvested like 2 weeks ago and the grain that's on the ground is already wilting and you're going to get like some bad food. I want you to watch where they're harvesting. And where my employees are, that's where I want you. I want you to go with the women who are gleaning the fields. I want you to stick with them so that you can get the good stuff. And working out here is hard. This is the Middle East, people. It's hot. And he said, when you're thirsty, I don't want you to drop dead of heat exhaustion. I don't want you to have to leave to go back into town to try and get some water or something. I want you to go to the jars that my men have filled. So now, who is now working for Ruth? His men. I want you to go to the jars that my men have filled, and I want you to get water whenever you need it. This guy knows how to treat people. This guy knows how to care for people. Guys in the room, be like Boaz. I'm serious. As you grow up, you need to care for people, care for women like Ruth. You need to care for the girls in this room like that. You need to care for your moms and your sisters and your friends and your cousins. You need to care for the women in your life with this kind of care and respect. This is a man. This is a guy that everybody, and because he's like this, everybody loves him. You want people to like you? You want people to respect you? Don't be a punk. It's not going to get you anywhere. Might get you your way sometimes, but everybody will hate you. You need to treat people the way that Boaz treats them. At this, she bowed with her face to the ground. Said, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? Boaz replied, I've been told about all that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. How you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. See, here's something that has happened. Ruth chose to come back to Israel. Ruth chose to come to Bethlehem. She chose to put her faith in God, in Yahweh. And this is one of the things that what Boaz is doing is he's encouraging her by going, hey, I noticed. Have you ever been doing something? You're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to be good. You're trying to follow the rules, or you're trying whatever, and you just wonder whether anybody's even noticing. You ever tried that with your siblings? Like you're trying really hard not to smash their face into the concrete, and well, that was kind of dark. You're trying really hard not to scream at them and call them doo-doo face, and whatever it is, and your parents don't thank you. Your parents don't seem to notice. You're trying really hard in school in a subject that maybe you're not very good at, and you're working hard, you're doing your work, and the teacher never goes, hey, I notice you're working really hard. It's really disheartening, right? You're just like, is any of this worth it? God uses Boaz to speak into Naomi's life, going, look, I notice. And not only does Boaz notice, but God notices. And I want to say that to you guys as a reminder and an encouragement to you. Though people may not acknowledge your efforts, though people may not give you thumbs up and be like, hey, way to go, God knows what you're doing. God knows your heart. And that's why he says, do everything to the best of your ability. Do it not like you're doing it for people, but like you're doing it for God. Because guess what? People may never acknowledge what you're doing. And if you're waiting for people to acknowledge what you're doing, we have a limit to that, right? We're only going to try so long. And if nobody notices, forget it. It's not worth it. But if we trust that God sees us and God knows what we're doing, let's do it for him. And God uses Boaz here to encourage Ruth, going, hey, I heard about what you're doing. I know what you've been through. And I want to be in a place of just blessing you, of encouraging your life. May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord, she said. You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants. Did you get that? She goes, thank you for treating me kindly, even though what? I'm not one of your servants, so what does she deserve? To be kicked out? She doesn't deserve anything. Ruth is in a place where she recognizes that in her position, she doesn't deserve anything. She's not entitled to anything. She recognizes that the only stuff she's going to get is stuff that is given to her because of grace and mercy. And then I got thinking about my life and how many of the blessings in my life I feel like I deserve. I deserve this because I'm a nice guy. Oh, I deserve this because I did a favor for somebody. Oh, I deserve this because I pay my bills. Oh, I deserve that. And I get entitled to the blessings of God because after all, I'm a pastor. I work for Jesus. And so of course he's going to bless me because I've earned it. Ruth is in a place where she recognizes, I don't deserve anything. And you guys, it is only because of the grace of Jesus that we can be blessed, that we can have life. And we need to be really careful of the sense of entitlement that we get of just going, well, yeah, I deserve it because I'm a good person. I went to youth group last week. I did 30-hour famine. There better be some blessings coming my way. Right? We get like that. Right? We do, don't we? Like, I could really use this, and so maybe I'll put a little money in that box over there, and God will appreciate me. You know, we get really entitled. So Boaz says to Ruth, and again, this is just such a sweet interaction. You're going to understand why Ruth is so willing to go along with the next stuff that we're going to talk about next week. But Boaz said, Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Oh, wait, I already said that. Where am I? Oh, down here. May I continue to find favor in your eyes. Then, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here. They have a little date. Come here. No, it's not ooh yet. No, it's not ooh yet. It's not time for ooh. This is like coffee at Starbucks. At mealtime, Boaz says to her, come over here. Have some bread. Dip it in the wine vinegar. And Ruth goes, okay. And she went, she sat down with the harvesters, and he offered her some roasted grain. Not ooh yet. No. I mean, that was like Chick-fil-A after school. Okay, that was the... And she ate all she wanted and had some left over. Now, this was something that was a really great point that I read in a commentary, that in most places in the world, you do not eat until you're full. You eat until it's gone, right? And usually that's before you're full. Here, we eat till we're full. We just get seconds and thirds and buffets, right? In most of the rest of the world, especially back then, you ate until it was gone. And you were often left hungry. Here, he let her eat as much as she wanted and had some left over. She gets up and goes back out to glean some more because there's still some daylight. She goes out to glean some more barley. And as everybody else is getting up, he calls his guys around. Guys, come here. See that chick? Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Don't give her a hard time. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. He's ordering flowers. Here is what he's doing. He's telling his guys, look, she's going to be around. And I don't want her just picking up the barley that has fallen on the ground. I don't want her to only get the stuff that's left over. I want her to be able to take it directly from the source. So what I want you to do is just leave some of the full stalks. Just leave them and let her take them. And don't give her a hard time. There may be some of the other workers who are like, hey, why is that, foreigner getting to take? Just shut them up. You take care of it. Leave Ruth alone. Let Ruth do what she wants to do. This would be, like I said, scandalous. This doesn't happen, especially with a foreigner. What Boaz is doing is huge. And so she gleaned in the field until evening and threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to an ephah. It was about 30 pounds of barley. This was basically, like, imagine Ruth. She's 5'2", 94 and a half pounds, and she's got 30 pounds of barley that she's just trying to carry home. I mean, everybody in town is like, Ruth, whoa, where did she get all that? And Boaz is standing at the edge of his field. I don't know why he didn't offer to help, but you don't walk a girl home on the first, and so he's standing there at the edge of the field as Ruth is just stumbling through town with all this barley from Boaz. It's not like the container, it says Boaz Inc. Everybody knows where she got it. And she's walking through town and she brings it home to Naomi. She's like, hey, Mom. And I quote, where have you been, young lady? This is about a month's worth of food. Naomi probably has never seen this much food in her life, ever. And here on her first day at work, Ruth comes home with 30 pounds of barley, and Naomi wants to know, what have you done? Where have you been? And who am I talking about? Ruth is happy to share the story. She's like, there's this guy down the road. His name's Bo. And he let me go into his field and just like, they forgot to pick all this barley. It was just laying there on the ground. It was just like, it was neat in rows and some of it was already tied up and everything. I don't know how it got me. Maybe God grows the barley different here. And I was just able to scoop it up. And I took it back to the barn and I did the barley thing to it. And I got it. And they put it in a sack for me and sent me home.
What is it?
Now, at this, Naomi, who am I talking about? At this point, Naomi says, oh. And her wheels begin to turn. She probably feels a little bit dumb because she goes, oh, Boaz. That's one of my husband's relatives. Yeah, forgot about him. I guess we might have some hope. The name of the man you worked for, his name is Boaz. The Lord bless him. Naomi said to Ruth, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. She's talking about God. The man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers. We're going to talk more about being a guardian redeemer next week, but Naomi's heart shifts here. Naomi before was, the Lord has afflicted me. I went away full, I came back empty. The Lord isn't helping. The Lord is just allowing me to suffer and be destitute. And here, it says, the Lord bless him. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. So she's referring to, he honored us, my family, Elimelech, before we left. And now as we returned, God is continuing to be faithful to us. I'm going to give you just a quick overview. A guardian redeemer was someone in the family that had the right to buy back anything that their family members had lost. So when Naomi and Elimelech and the boys left Bethlehem, they lost everything. The land was then just turned over. They walked, it was a foreclosure. They walked away. And anything they didn't have with them, they lost. A guardian redeemer, what she's referring to, is she's saying Boaz is our guardian redeemer. Boaz is the one in our family, because he's part of my husband's line, that has the ability to buy back everything that we lost. Everything that we had before. And Ruth goes on and goes, well, this is wonderful, because he said, come back tomorrow. And Naomi looked at her and went, oh, you're going back tomorrow. God, I pray that you would sink this into our hearts, that you would bring us into a place like we see you have Naomi and Ruth, where we would realize that no matter what we're facing in our life right now, that you are at work. God, and that though we may be going through a lot of pain and there may be stuff we don't understand, if we will be faithful to follow you, if we will trust you, you can bring life out of it. And God, we confess that's hard to see sometimes, and it feels like we're hopeless. We feel like we're in a foreign land and we don't have anything going for us. But God, your Holy Spirit can give us hope and peace. And so I pray over every person in this room that you would give the hope and the peace that only you can give. It can only come from you. And I pray that you would help each of us not to give up, not to reach our limit, and because nobody's telling us good job or nobody's telling us they appreciate what we're doing, that we wouldn't give up doing the right thing. And that we would do everything for your glory. And that we would come to you with the things that we have lost hope about. The stuff where we've stopped believing that you could do anything. We've stopped hoping for anything different. God, reveal to us that you are there. And that you can do the impossible. You can bring life out of death. And you can bring life out of the ruins. Teach our hearts that, Lord, because our heads just don't get it. So be with us this week in all that we do. May our eyes be focused on you. In Jesus' name, amen.